You know, as I mentioned a few moments ago, today we're going to look at another one of those fundamental questions of life. And today's question is, who am I? Thanks, Ron. So who am I? You know, have you seen the movie The Blind Side? Really a moving real-life drama of Michael Oher in his life. He was a really big kid who grew up in Memphis. And by God's grace, he was adopted by a family, a wonderful couple, but a family that was so different from his. And the mom, his adopted mother, was a mama bear who just watched out for him. His high school football coach saw no use in him since he was a big kid, but he was too passive to hit anybody on the football field. And so he was ready to give up on it. But Mama Bear, the mom, saw something the coach didn't. The minute that the coach put him on the blind side of the quarterback to protect him, Michael flourished. And that led to a stellar career in the National Football League. What would have happened? What do you think would have happened if she had not seen Michael for who he really was? He probably would have listened to that high school football coach and believed he was a terrible football player. Imagine the story if he never discovered his true identity. The reality is, you and I probably have similar stories in our lifetimes. Somewhere along the way, some well-meaning coach or a teacher or a parent or a classmate misidentified something about us. And some of us right now may have those thoughts. I wonder if I've missed part of my true identity. Maybe I haven't discovered everything about me that I should. Others may feel your heart racing now because you know in your gut you're not living up to your potential. You know you were meant for something more, but you just have that nagging voice in your mind. You're not good enough. Why would you dream a dream like that? But what if we are destined for more? What if we are destined for something different? Fashioned for some kind of greatness, created for a higher purpose. What if? What if? This is one of the oldest and most perpetual questions of mankind. Who am I? And it's the core question, really, of every philosophy and religion in world history. So our text for today is part of the reading that Corey did for us a while ago. It's Genesis 1, verse 26. And here, some interesting words that God uses. Let us make mankind in our image, and after our likeness, so that they may rule over the rest of creation. Notice I've underlined a few words in that verse. And I believe those three words I've underlined there are keys to understanding your identity, your God-given purpose of why you and I are here in this world today. And that first underlined word is the word us. Genesis 1:26 is one of the most curious and maybe one of the most important verses in all of Scripture. Notice that it begins, let us. The God of the Bible from the very beginning is described as community. Our God is a God of we, not a God of me. Theologians have called this the doctrine of the Trinity for some 2,000 years now. We will never fully understand the mechanics of what that really means. But the basic idea is pretty simple. A single God with multiple persons. Or the ancient world, they would have called them manifestations. In some mysterious way, our God speaks of himself as us. Of course, the Bible later reveals that us is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But above all, all of that, and the explaining all of that is probably above all of our pay grades. Nevertheless, it is crucial for us to really understand and embrace this doctrine for a number of reasons. But one reason that I'd like to focus on right now is the communal nature of God. I think this is really important. You see, God himself is community. And he made us to be communal. By nature, we were created to be more we than me. God created us in and for community. So our identity, and not just a preference, our identity is communal. Who am I? You can answer that question literally. I'm a son, I'm a father, I'm a husband, a friend, a partner, a pastor. There's probably a lot of other terms too, but I can't think of them right now. But all of those roles involve what? Relationships, community. Without my relationships, I don't have an authentic identity. I suspect that's why so many young people today who run away to find themselves really get lost in that process. Perhaps that's why those who rise to the top of their organizations feel so isolated and alone. Or how about those who achieve fame? They often become so isolated by bodyguards and managers that they experience severe emotional and social crisis. We see it often. When we lose community, we lose identity. So the second word I underlined was the word image. That leads to another major truth from our text today, from verse 26. What does it mean when the Bible says we were made in the image of God? Now, granted, as I mentioned before, clearly it does not mean that we physically look like God, because that's not possible. God is spirit. So I think we need to look at the characteristics of God. Obviously, there's some characteristics of God that you and I will never have. Right? Omnipresence. God is present everywhere at the same time. I don't know about you, but I don't think I'll get there. Omniscient. God knows everything. And then omnipotence. All powerful. Those are things that are unique characteristics of God, and we will not ever have them. But then if you look at all of animal life in creation, there are some common characteristics that we all have. We all suffer fear. We suffer hunger. We feel cold and hot and those kinds of characteristics we all share in common with other animals in creation. But then there are some really interesting, unique characteristics that we as people share with God and with no other animals. And so I think if we took a look at those, that will help us understand more clearly of what it means, us being created in the image of God. So what might those characteristics be? So let's take a look at a few of them. First one is artistic creativity. Art. We create art. And we do it all the time. There's nowhere you can go that you're not surrounded by some type or form of art. Paintings on walls, just color splashes on the houses. We plant things around our property. Maybe it's just we dress with current fashions. Our cars, offices, homes, churches are all decorated in some fashion with art. Just look around our worship center. We have art here. And we create sanctuaries called art museums. Art seems to be sacred for the human species. Similarly, another characteristic is time. What's the first thing we do when we get up in the morning? I grab my watch to see what time it is, or I look at my phone. What time is it? Time seems to be very important to us. We plan our days, we count them on calendars, we memorialize them with birthdays and anniversaries. No animal does any of that. So it's a unique characteristic of us. Time management seems to be hardwired into us. And God uses time, even though he is above time. He put the characteristic in us. And though we live in a moment, we also have eternity in our hearts. So in a way, we live above time also. The third characteristic that I'd like to comment on is communal eating. You know, there's often feeding frenzies. You see it in fish and maybe birds and some other types of animals. But nothing like the meals that humans share. Animals do not not schedule their feedings. They just simply eat when they're hungry. They don't eat a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner. They certainly don't decorate their tables with candles and linens. But you know, eating is actually more significant than you might imagine. Throughout the Bible, there are lots of meals, and every one of them seems to be spiritually significant. What's the first thing we're going to do when we get to New Jerusalem? We're going to have a meal. And I think that's why one of the few universal features of every Christian church throughout all of history has been the sacrament of the Lord's Supper, Holy Communion. So let's look at one more characteristic that I think is unique to us and God, and that is language. God uses language to communicate his love to us. No other animal has that advantage. Certain animals can be taught sign language. Some aquatic mammals have advanced calls, perhaps, but no animal writes poetry. No birds truly sing. They only mimic sounds they hear. It's a far cry from creating a melody or telling a story, rhyming words, or writing a novel. We alone share this characteristic with God. And when you take these four characteristics all together, something surfaces that is pretty remarkable. Think about these four characteristics we just talked about and ask yourself, what do they have in common? Each one of them are part of our mundane days. Part of our mundane, routine, everyday lives. They come to us wherever we are. In the bedroom, boardroom, coffee shop, funeral home, sporting events. It doesn't matter. These four characteristics that we share with God are there in our everyday moments. We were created for such divine community. It is, in short, our created nature. Every moment of every day, in the smallest ways, we are most like God. I'm going to say that again. Every moment of every day, we are most like God. In other words, we are most like God in our most mundane moments. One final thought from Genesis 1:26. The third word that I underlined was the word rule. God designed us to rule over all of his creation. He designed us to have dominion, to be the stewards of his creation. God created the heavens and the earth, and then he charged us to make a world out of the stuff that makes up his creation. He put creation under our care to become a world reflective of his good nature. So as Christians, God presents us an incredible opportunity, especially through our local churches, to model a community that's devoted to compassion and love in the midst of all this brokenness throughout the world. So we have come to the time in our message now for what difference will you make today? What difference will you make today? Remember, you are most like God in the most mundane moments of your life, the routine of your days. So to make a difference today doesn't have to be a colossal effort of any kind. You just need to live your life with the nature of God. So here's a challenge I'll leave you with. Identify one of these four characteristics that we talked about today. Art, time, meals, language. Just pick one of those that you could use to create community this week. You can create community in your family. You can do it at work, at your church, in your neighborhood. It doesn't matter. The idea is that in doing so, you'll bring a bit of heaven to earth. And I would encourage you, don't race past this challenge. Be intentional. Calendar it. Choose a time and a place and a people where you're going to exercise part of your divine nature for communal improvement. So here's maybe a few specific ideas. At work, you could write a note of encouragement to a colleague, or schedule a coaching session over lunch so they could be a better employee. At home, schedule a family meal where you go around the table and you ask each person there to identify 3 things they're thankful for. Take a friend or a family member to the Museum of Idaho or the Colonial Theater. Call a friend and invite them to lunch. Or better yet, call several friends and invite them to lunch. So you get a call from me today for lunch next week. I do this pretty often, as some of you know. Remember, you are most like God in the mundane of everyday